Good evening, everyone. Thank you very much for joining us during this very lovely holiday in China, the Golden Week in China. And today we have pleasure to invite Mr. Kotaro Yamabe to join us. And he is the Japanese lawyer, and he is also the director for Music Security, which is one of leading crowdfunding platform in Japan. And I believe around 20 years history, I believe it's one of very leading and kickstart in very early stage crowdfunding platform. So today, I think it is really our pleasure, given that Mr. Kotaro Yamabe used to work in the law firm and also work with the government and also work with the crowdfunding platform. So it will be very valuable for us to get your perspective. So today, Kotaro, we are very much looking forward to your presentation and to exchange discussion with you. So Kotaro, the floor is yours.
Okay, thank you, Fungi, for the introduction. I'm very honored to be the speaker here today, and I want to thank everybody involved. Thank you. I will start sharing my screen. So, okay, can you see the screen? Okay. So, I would like to present about the FinTech development and regulation in Japan. My name is Kotaro Yamabe, and I work at a company called Music Securities. So this is the contents of today's presentation. I would first give a brief introduction about myself and the company that I work for, Music Securities. And next, I want to explain how the platform Securite, this is the investment crowdfunding platform that we operate. So I want to explain how this works. And also, I want to talk about some topics related to reward-based crowdfunding in Japan recently, and also some issues with lending-based crowdfunding models in Japan. And lastly, I want to talk a little bit about initial coin offerings and security token offerings, as there were recently there were amendments to the regulation regarding this area. And in the end, I want to have some discussion in Q&A session. Okay. Okay, so I will start with introduction about myself. My name is Kotaro Yamabe. I'm a lawyer, and I became lawyer in Japan in 2007. And from 2007, I started working at Nagashima Ono and Tsunematsu, which is one of the biggest law firms in Japan. And there, I was involved in major like financial transactions, like real estate securitization, project finance. And I wasn't really involved with anything regarded to FinTech or crowdfunding at the time. I worked in like the traditional finance sector, working mainly for big banks and financial institutions. And from 2012, I was seconded to the Financial Services Agency of Japan. And the Financial Services Agency is the financial regulator in Japan, and they also make the rules regarding these financial activities. And there, I was there for 2 years and 3 months. And in the last year, I was responsible for drafting legislation regarding investment-based crowdfunding in Japan. And I will talk about the history of crowdfunding in Japan in a moment. But at this time, around this time, there was movement to enable equity crowdfunding in Japan. So equity crowdfunding in Japan was virtually prohibited until 2015. And in 2014, we made new law to enable equity crowdfunding in Japan. And I was responsible for drafting it. And so I started working with the crowdfunding sector around this time, and I have been involved ever since. And from 2014, I did a master's in corporate law at the University of Cambridge. And after coming back to Japan in 2015, I started working at Music Securities. I was first on a secondment basis from a law firm. And the reason I went to Music Securities is it's one of the oldest crowdfunding platforms in Japan. And they were one of the, well, they were the biggest platforms operating, especially in the investment crowdfunding model. And so I thought it would be very interesting to see how it works, given that I was in the financial services agency. And I was working 2 years there. And then in 2017, I was again seconded to a governmental agency. This time I went to the Ministry of Land, Infrastructure, Transport, and Tourism. And this is a very big ministry. But I went to the section that was responsible for rules regarding real estate investment. And the reason I went there was because, again, they were trying to make rules regarding real estate crowdfunding at the time. And I was, again, responsible for making new rules regarding the real estate crowdfunding in Japan. And from 2018, I again returned to Music Securities. And from 2020, I have been director of the company. And this year, I also finally left my law firm. And so I'm currently working solely for Music Securities. And this next slide, this is the description of our company, Music Securities. So it was founded in 2000. And the reason the company's name is Music Securities is because we started out as a company that creates funds for musicians. And in the next slide, on the top, this is our CEO and founder, Masami Komatsu. So he was a musician himself. And so he started this business with the business model to um, enable musicians to gather money directly from their fans to create music albums. And the original business model is based on this. So musicians would gather investment from their fans, and the return of the investment would be determined by how many number of albums they sold. So if the CD that is created from the investment sells very well, investors get positive returns. But if the CD doesn't sell very well, they could lose their money. But the original idea was that even so, even although that there is a risk of losing their money, the fans would be able to directly support their favorite musicians. So this is like very primitive type of crowdfunding that we started in 2000. And I will talk a little bit about how the company has progressed later. But going back to the slide, we have about 50 employees now. Our head office in Tokyo, but we have regional offices in other parts of Tokyo. And currently we have 4 business units. And this is a little bit different a few years ago. So first of all, we have the security business, which is the operation of the investment crowdfunding platform. And also we have a sustainability business unit. And the aim of this business is to originate funds for institutional investors. So this is not crowdfunding, but making bigger funds for institutional investors. And especially we want to create funds to solve the Sustainable Development Goals, SDGs, set by the UN. And there's also the Alliance Business Unit, which aim is to establish and manage joint ventures with financial institutions. And I will talk about this a little bit later. And there is also this record business, and this is like a traditional music business. So we make records, administer music copyrights, and manage artists. So we do a lot of things in this relatively small company. And here is the history of music securities. As I just explained, we started business to create music funds in 2000. And but in 2007, we created our first non-music fund, and it was a Junmai Sake fund. And sake is a type of, as you probably know, Japanese alcohol drink. And and Junmai means it's made completely out of rice without any additives. So we created this fund for this sake maker, and but what we found out was that the music fund scheme could be applied to many different types of businesses. And sake, there are fans for certain types of sake, and so fans of the sake can invest to create their favorite kind of sake, and they can get that as a return. So, so we started out doing this model in 2007, and in 2008 there was an amendment to the laws of Japan, and it required business operators like us to register as financial instruments business operators. So we registered as such in 2008, and we have been regulated by the Financial Services Agency since then. And in 2009, we launched our current investment platform. And in 2011, we launched disaster area support funds to help businesses that were affected by the Great East Japan earthquake. And this was a very popular scheme. Um, so here is the description of it. So we created funds and gathered about 11 million US dollars for 38 businesses from around 30,000 individuals. So this was very popular, and the unique model of this was that it was half investment and half donation. So each investment was, as it says here in the left bottom side, was 10,500 yen. The 500 yen was fee to our company, but the um, 5,000 yen was investment and 5,000 was donation. So this was kind of a unique mix of like philanthropic donation and investment, and it was very popular at the time. And there are also some topics this year. There is going to be an expo that is going to be held in Osaka in 2025, and we have been named as project partner of one of the teams, and we plan to expand their financing model uh, towards this expo in 2025. And also, we do our donation service to gather donations to university research. We have partnership with the University of Tokyo and also the University of Kyoto Medical Department. And we are gathering donations to, for example, um, help research, like fight the coronavirus. So, and our donation service has received accreditation from the Ministry of Education, Culture, Sports, Science, and Technology as one of the services that help research in Japan. So this is one area that we are currently working very hard on. And another interesting thing that happened in 2020 this year is that we have created a joint venture with Kyushu Financial Group, which is one of the uh, biggest regional banks in Japan in the Kyushu region. Uh, Kumamoto Daiichi Shinkin Bank, which is another regional bank, and Kyushu Electric Power, which is a local electric company. So we have created a new company called Global Crowdfunding, and its goal is to do operate a crowdfunding platform, including investment-based crowdfunding in the Kyushu area. So this is kind of like new business model that we're trying to do, create local platforms in other areas. And in this slide, I want to talk about how our platform works. So our platform, Securite, is an investment crowdfunding platform. We used to call it hometown investment uh, crowdfunding because investors could choose local businesses and invest. Um, for example, people from Kyushu that are working in Tokyo, they can invest in businesses in Kyushu. Um, but recently, we rather use the word impact investment to show that our focus is not only financial returns, but non-financial returns, like returns to society, like investment to make society better. And we value the SDGs that are set by the UN. So we try to pick up businesses that contribute to the SDGs in some way. And also, in some cases, we try to do impact measurement of the investment. And the characteristic of the funds we provide, our business model, it's based on a revenue sharing model. So as I said, the original business is like the return on the investors would depend on how many number of albums that were sold. So if the album sells very well, investors get a positive return. But if it doesn't sell that well, they could get a negative return. So it's not, the capital is not guaranteed. So this is the difference between uh, lending-based crowdfunding models. And for business owners, there is no need for personal guarantee or lien. So yeah, it's very friendly to the business. And also, since it's a revenue sharing model, there is no acquisition of shares. So it's not equity crowdfunding. The business does not have to offer shares to the investors. And also, since it's based on contract, the return can be set very flexibly. The length of the term is usually from 1 to 10 years. So repayment can continue over 10 years. And also, we can set the terms very flexibly. For example, like you can do like payment every year or payment at the end of the uh, term. And the return will be based on the performance of the business. Like, so they businesses pay a pre-agreed portion of the sales from the business. And from a legal perspective, how this works, we, we use a revenue sharing agreement, and it's called Tokume Kumiai Agreement in Japanese, and it means silent partnership in English. We call it the TK agreement. So this is the revenue sharing agreement that is entered into directly between the investors and their entrepreneurs. So our company is just a platform. The agreement is directly between the investors and the businesses, but the money flow is through the platform. So investors pay the investment amounts to Music Securities. We pass it to the entrepreneurs, and then when the entrepreneurs pay to the investors, they pay through our platform. And this is the overview of the regulation in Japan. So the revenue sharing agreement is a type of collective investment scheme, and it's regulated by the Financial Service Agency. And to solicit investment in such agreement, it's necessary to register with the Financial Service Agency as Type 2 financial instruments business operators, and our company has been registered since 2008. And these financial instruments business operators are subject to regular financial regulation, such as anti-money laundering and segregation of customer funds. And in addition, when you operate investment-based crowdfunding, there are certain additional rules like performing proper due diligence, making detailed disclosure on the internet, and ensuring that the information regarding the invested business is appropriately provided to the investors. And if you're interested, our company's business model has been uh, documented in some English publications. So if you're interested, here's a example. It was written by the Inter-American Development Bank and JICA, and you can see it on the website. And also there are some others. If you're interested, you can look on our company website. There is an English page, and there are links to the English reports. And from here, I want to talk a little bit about other crowdfunding platforms and models besides our company. And the first is some topics related to reward-based crowdfunding. And reward-based crowdfunding, first of all, is not regulated in Japan as in other parts of the world. So you don't need a particular license to operate a reward-based crowdfunding platform. So it's kind of hard to say how many number of platforms there are, but most famous platforms began businesses after the Great East Japan earthquake in 2011. So many platforms were born in 2011, 2012, 2013, around that time. And since it's not regulated, I think it can be said that competition between the reward-based crowdfunding platforms is pretty harsh. But in 2019, there was a big event, and one of the major platforms, Makuake, went public on the Tokyo Stock Exchange Mother's Market. So this was a very, I think, significant event for all crowdfunding platforms in the sense that one of them uh, went through an IPO. And in 2020, many platforms have said that they have the record volume of transactions on their platform. And I think much of this volume is probably gift cards and vouchers to prepay businesses affected by the COVID-19. What this means is that, so like similar to other countries, Japan, we had to do a lockdown, so to say, and many businesses like restaurants and like hotels, they lost virtually all of their sales. And um, to sustain the business, first of all, many banks and financial institutions lent money to them, but they also went to crowdfunding. And many of the um, platforms and companies, they issue these gift certificates that so uh, the users can buy, and so they can so when the uh, pandemic is over, they can go to the uh, restaurants or hotels and use them for a higher price. For example, like if you pay 5,000 yen, you could maybe get 6,000 yen amount of certificates that you can use later. So this is kind of like a prepayment scheme, and it was very popular. Um, and here I have a link to yeah you can't I don't you can't really click on it, but so there is a English article explaining how Japanese crowdfunding platforms have reported surge in business during the pandemic. And so I think in general, I think it can be said that reward-based crowdfunding is is becoming more and more popular in Japan due to the pandemic. Okay, so I want to talk next about lending-based crowdfunding in Japan. And here, I kind of want to discuss later with Hung Yi and Pui and Sally about other countries' business models because this may be unique to Japan. And in the lending sector, it's commonly called social lending in Japan, but I don't like to use that name very much because it isn't very social, um, really. So this lending model in Japan existed since at least 2008, I think. And as in other countries, this is the largest segment of crowdfunding in Japan if you judge it by the amount of investment that goes through. And um, there used to be peer-to-peer lending platforms, but they disappeared. And currently, there is virtually no peer-to-peer lending. Uh, what I want to say is that most borrowers of this scheme are companies, businesses, and not individuals. So there is no peer-to-peer lending in the sense that individuals are lending money to individuals in Japan. And I will explain about this later, but many of these schemes are really real estate investment schemes to gather money from individual investors and lend it to businesses that invest in real estate. So this is kind of like um, it's, yeah, I think it's really essentially like a real estate crowdfunding scheme, and it was very popular in Japan. But beginning from 2017, the Financial Service Agency started conducting inspections and taking administrative actions against several crowd lending platforms, and which included some of the biggest and most famous ones. And several were punished for disclosing false information to investors, and even some were accused of misappropriating investors' money. And in 2019, the Type 2 Financial Instruments Firms Association, which is a self-regulatory organization for Type 2 financial instruments business operators, so they issued new rules regarding lending-based crowdfunding, and which included stricter due diligence, disclosure to investors, and monitoring of the investment. So, so there were some very bad incidents that um, led to damage to investors, and it led to the stricter rules being enforced. And this is the scheme of um, these lending models in Japan. And many lawyers say that the unique structure of this lending model in Japan, it was responsible for the platforms to disclose misleading information to investors. And this is due to the strict interpretation of the Money Lending Business Act of Japan that investors lending money through this scheme may be required to register as money lenders. So I think in many countries, I don't know about other countries, but my guess is that in other countries, individual investors in a lending model, they are allowed to lend directly to the borrowers. But in Japan, um, the Financial Service Agency has said that that would not be allowed. Um, because if these individual investors were lending money directly to the borrower, the investors would be operating a money lending business. So they have to register as money lenders and comply with the Money Lending Business Act. So in order to evade this um, registration, the popular scheme was that they use the TK agreement again, which is like the revenue sharing or investment agreement, and the individual investors would invest in lenders that would make loans to the borrowers. And so, in a sense, they are investing in the money lending business. And also, what was uh, difficult was that the financial service agency, it is said that initially they said you shouldn't show the names or the particular characteristics of the borrower to the individual investors, because if the individual investors knew who the actual borrowers were, they would be effectively, it would be the same as lending directly to them. So so initially, it is said that the financial service agency, they required the lenders to like hide the actual names of the borrowers. So so the part in uh, blue bracket here, like who are the borrowers and what they are actually using the money for, there was insufficient disclosure to the investors. And I think this made it easier for the platforms mm, to do bad things. And in many in some of this, so in most of the cases that I explained in the previous slide, in the punished platforms, so they disclose false or misleading information regarding the borrower or what the funds were actually going to use for. And in some even extreme cases, the lender and the borrower were actually affiliated companies. So, so the lender would gather money from individual investors. They would make loans to the borrower, but the borrower is actually effectively a subsidiary of the lender, and the money goes like where it shouldn't used to be. And so there were at least uh, like 6 companies that were punished. And so, but this led to the new rules that were uh, implemented in 2019. So the lending model is still here in Japan, and I think there are a significant amount of investment that goes through, and there are many platforms that are still operating. But I think the compliance level of these platforms have rose dramatically in the past few years, and I think the financial services agency's supervision over this sector has become more stricter in the recent years. And one last thing, what I said um, when I said that this is effectively a real estate investment scheme is that many of the loans were actually used for real estate investment. And so the money that the repayment of the money to the investors, where that money comes from, in many schemes, I think it was real estate investment. So um, this, I think, is another unique characteristic of the Japanese model. So when you say crowd lending or peer-to-peer lending, you kind of image borrowers as individuals or like small businesses. But I think in reality, many of them were real estate investment. Okay, so I want to move on. This is the final topic. Regulation on ICOs, initial coin offerings, and security token offerings. And I think this, again, is similar to other countries, but before 2016, there was uncertainty regarding which regulation would be applied to ICOs. And some said that it's the same with reward-based crowdfunding. So why do you need regulation? Um, by this, it means like, so in reward-based crowdfunding, the rewards are non-financial things. Like, for example, like if you gave out trading cards as return in reward-based crowdfunding, you aren't regulated. So, like even if you um, have blockchain-backed tokens, it shouldn't necessarily really be regulated. But in 2016, the Payment Services Act in Japan was amended, and it was amended to regulate virtual currency exchanges. And under this act, the interpretation was that if the token fell under the definition of virtual currency as defined by the act, the issuance of the token, which means the ICO, would be regulated. And so the ICO would have to be conducted through a regulated virtual currency exchange. So this rule, which was effective from April 2017, made it very difficult to conduct legal ICOs in Japan. And also in 2018, one of the largest virtual currency exchanges in Japan, CoinCheck, was hacked, and a lot of money were stolen from the exchange. And since then, regulation and supervision over this sector has become stricter as well. And last year, in 2019, there was an amendment again to the laws, and so stricter regulations were imposed to the crypto asset exchanges. And also, there were new rules that were introduced regarding security token offerings. And I haven't had time to put this in the slides, but the new rules related to security token offerings are also very strict. They are based on the investment-based crowdfunding model in a sense. So they require due diligence on the issuer, um, disclosure to the investors. But since security token are more liquid than uh, crowdfunding securities, uh, meaning that so they can be transferred more easily. Um, the disclosure rules regarding security token offerings are much stricter and more burdensome for than regular investment crowdfunding. And also in these investment-based crowdfundings um, in Japan, as I explained, usually the license that is required to conduct investment-based crowdfunding, including crowd lending, is this Type 2 financial instruments business operating license. And there is Type 1, and Type 1 is the stricter license, and it's more difficult to obtain. And regarding STOs, the new rule requires the business operators to obtain this Type 1 license. And Type 1 licenses are usually only obtained by big securities firms. So it's pretty difficult, I think, to conduct STOs in Japan under the new rule. And SBI, the SoftBank Investment Group, has taking the lead in this field. They have set up a security token offering association in Japan, and I think they, as well as many other companies, are trying to create this new business model in Japan. But my personal view is that the regulation is very strict, so it remains to be seen whether security token offerings would really take off in Japan. I know that there are some projects that are being conducted regarding this field, but many are just only in the experimental stages, and they don't like involve real investment yet. So the STO market hasn't really started, I think, and so I think whether it will begin depends on um, like the work of the companies that are trying very hard to do it right now. Okay. So this is my presentation about the fintech trends and regulations in Japan. I'm happy to take questions and discuss. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Kotaro, for your very comprehensive introduction for the Japanese fintech relevant regulation, particularly focusing on the lending and the crowdfunding, as well as the ICO, that the recent issue on fintech. So I think that it will be very interesting, given that Japan, we do see that some of the unique business model. And as you mentioned that even though that P2P lending is conducted in Japan, but most borrower from the evidence-based research, maybe it is much more from the company or the real estate developer. So I think it will be very interesting, let's say, given that you work with the Chinese fintech company quite closely. So do you see any similarity or the difference which that Japan is quite unique, and what kind of like the field that perhaps China and also Japan we can work together or complementary to certain extent?
Okay, thank you, Hongyi, and thank you, Mr. Kotaro, for your presentation. I think Japan is always very unique in terms of like their business model, right? I would like to ask one question before the regular discussion, because I was quite interested at the very beginning. Mr. Kotaro mentioned that the music Securities is starting from that you're doing like this kind of business for musicians, right? So I was wondering, is this kind of business still doing in Japan or in music Securities? Because currently we do not buy albums. I mean, the real product we download from internet. So are you still, I mean, this kind of business model, how is it improved or how is it development recently?
Yes, actually, we haven't had a music fund in the last couple of years. And yes, as you correctly pointed out, the number of sales of CDs is dropping in Japan as well.
Yeah.
So the most recent music fund, so it wasn't a positive return, but
Okay.
but I think our business model can still be applied today. And if we were to create new funds right now, I think we would shift to the number of downloads or the number
Okay.
of playing times on the streaming, like Apple Music or like YouTube. I think.
Okay. So then you still like use these funds directly invest back to those musicians, right?
Yeah, so I think the basic idea can still be applied. So the certain percentage of the money would be paid to the investors if we use the investment scheme.
Oh, okay. And back to your topic, you introduced the so-called what the hometown investment. Yes. Or what kind? Yeah. Usually, what kind of business are those investment most interested in?
Okay.
In Japan.
Okay. Let me share my screen again.
Okay.
Yeah, so I have some examples.
Okay.
Yeah. So this is one of the music funds for one of the very famous hip hop musicians in Japan. And local businesses are more like this one. Well, this is pretty famous too, but this is a famous coffee company in Japan. They are located in Nagano, which is not one of the urban areas in Japan. So they started out as a small coffee shop in Nagano, but Mr. Maruyama, who is the CEO of the company, um, so they engage in direct trading, and so uh, he kind of like goes to South America and buys directly from the coffee farms, and so they make very high quality coffee. And so, and although they are like a local business, they have fans nationwide that buy their high quality coffee beans. So this is kind of like a popular scheme. Um, I don't know if I have other examples, but yeah. Going back again to the disaster area support funds. This is all local businesses that are located in the northeast Tohoku region of Japan that were affected by the earthquake and tsunami. And these are very local businesses. Like you can see some, I don't know what to say, like the sell fish, as you can see here. Yeah, many are like seafood or like fishing businesses. Some are on the bottom left is the again is the sake, uh, and yeah, and many of these are very local businesses, and especially so people from the Tohoku region that want to help their hometown, they would invest in businesses and entrepreneurs that are doing business in their hometown.
Okay. Okay, I see. Thank you, Mr. Kotaro. And I'd like to know, because you introduced a lot of like crowdfunding, like payments, like this kind of business in Japan. I would like to know that is that technology help a lot? I mean, as we all know, like Japan has very the regulatory of Japan is very like strict always. So do you think the like technology can help that? I mean, in terms of the FinTech or in terms of the regulatory, the technology, does it help a lot?
I think the advancement of technology has really helped the crowdfunding sector. I think Music Securities has been in business for quite some time, but many of the recent platforms, and especially these reward-based crowdfunding platforms, I think they consider themselves as tech firms. So they use a lot of technologies. They hire a lot of engineers to improve their platform. And so in a business sense, I think the advancement of technology has really helped. And also, I mentioned ICOs, but I think blockchain is another very hot topic in Japan. And I think many fintech firms are trying to integrate blockchain and crowdfunding in some way. Um, from a regulatory perspective, I don't know. Yeah, yeah. I think regulation in Japan is, yeah, as you said, I think relatively strict, and
Yes.
and it's also it takes a lot of time to change. And this year, especially with the effect of the pandemic, many people have said like you should abolish old rules that like require people to go to office, like. Yeah, yeah. And so
So
I
do you
think
think the pandemic is a challenge or opportunity for the whole society?
um, I think I think it depends, but I think there is opportunity for all firms. I think it's a race towards like adaptation, like who can change. I think uh, to the environment. I think and if you can't change, I think it's going to be a struggle. But I think it's an opportunity, especially for smaller companies like us that are
Yes.
doing new business.
Yes, yes. And my final question, I think maybe we can discuss a lot among Hongyi and Pawi. I would like to know from Mr. Kantaro, like how do you see the trend of fintech development in Japan? Because as we all know, it's like a aging society, right? The like old people in Japan, the percentage is relatively very high. So it's like the technology, how do you see its trend in the future?
That's a very difficult question. I think, but I think the future is the technology. I think so. Um, it's true that the aging population
Yes.
in Japan is the number is very large, and it's going to be a very big problem. But I think technology wise, I think many old people, even though they're old, many of them can use like new
Smartphone.
technology. Yes,
Okay.
smartphone and tablets, and I think uh, it can solve a lot of problems. And I think, yeah, I think it's changing, and um, I don't know to what extent. There
It's
are
okay.
many problems that I can't fix by technology, but I think I don't know. But I think as the generation grows older, so the people that are not that old right now, so we use
Yeah.
technology. So like I think um, like gradually the number of old people that are used to technology will increase. So I think it will. I think it will very much change society and like change the way old people live. Actually.
Yeah, yeah. Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you, Ms. Kataro. And Hongyi, you have anything you want to share? I know you've been living there for quite a long time, right?
Okay, so I think my question for Kotaro is much more focusing on because I think that music security working as a platform, you connect both your client and also potential investor. So my question is, how do you evaluate the qualification of your client who is coming to fundraising? Do you also use some artificial intelligence AI to access the credit, or how do you normally access the credit?
Mm. Yeah, um, we don't use artificial intelligence yet, um, and so it's based on manual due diligence.
Right.
But we do have a lot of experience in this area, so we have like a manual, and so we have experienced people. So we kind of used to this due diligence, and it's always a challenge. So if you want to expand the business, you want to accept as many businesses as possible. But if you do that, the quality of the platform uh, would fall. So it's a very difficult balancing act always. And I think our uh, biggest strength is the experience. We have uh, created, I think, more than 800 funds, and so we can learn from our past uh, results. And so I think we just have to like continue. improving. And I think what I can say here is that one of the things we really think is important is the characteristic of the founder or CEO of the company, which is it's not like really um, quantitative analysis, but more like a qualitative analysis of like what kind of person is running the business, and so whether the person is like really thinking about the local community and not just his company. I think that kind of view is very important.
Right. Okay, thank you very much for that. And on the other hand side, we know you also have the investor. And based on your presentation, we saw some of project. It seems to me it's not 100% the reward based. Partly is for donation. So how do you motivate the investor to join the project and to motivate them to make the donation or invest their money?
I think it's yeah, I think the key is empathy, or like social impact, like I said. So that's what we value most. So we want to attract investors that are not just interested in the monetary return, but interested in like making society better through investing money. And I know it's not that easy. I think it's much easier to gather money saying that like you can get like a lot of return, or you can get like very like good products. But I think we are very working very hard to attract investors that are interested in this field. And I think, but generally speaking, like SDGs and like ESG, there are a lot of investors that are interested in this field, not only individual investors, but institutional investors as well. So we want to, so we want to focus on these areas.
Right, because I think last time when I visit Japan and join music securities event, I think one of the event or like the activity very impressed me is that one kind of hostel, they promote themselves and tell the story, and also to attract people. If people go there to live, they have opportunity to enjoy the most beautiful scenery of the star and the galaxy. So I think that is also one of very important story. Maybe when we do the online activity, sometimes face to face, is also quite convincing.
Yes. Yeah. So we think empathy and like so story of the business is very important. What kind of story there is? The business you mentioned, I think, is the hotel in Kumamoto, which was affected also by an earthquake, and they're trying to rebuild. And there is a very nice view of the stars that can be seen from the hotel. So if you go and stay there, you can see the beautiful stars. And yeah, I think that kind of like aspect is important to attract fans for the business.
Okay, thank you very much, Kotaro. And with that, I want to turn to Paui. As we know that you conduct the research across the 10 ASEAN countries to review the fintech development and the regulation, particularly in Southeast Asia. So do you have any feedback or question for Kotaro?
First of all, many thanks, Kotaro, for your insight. I gain a deep understanding of the recent development of fintech industry in Japan, as well as its implications on regulatory responses in the country. Two questions concerning virtual assets and ICO regulations for my side. Mm-hmm. First, due to the complexity of Japanese regulations, which is further fortified by self-regulatory organization. Accordingly, from my understanding, it should be difficult for foreign-based exchanges to get an operating license in Japan, right? I would appreciate hearing your thoughts on this. For my second question, as far as I understand from your presentation, that is the amendment of regulations which seems to be response to previous Japanese exchange hacks in the recent years, right? There are requirements further addressed in the amended Payment Services Act, as well as the Financial Instruments and Exchange Act of Japan. For example, virtual asset exchanges are required to comply with the regulations concerning the separations of customer funds, right? To this, in brief, exchanges are also required to use third-party operators and also to use a reliable method or designated method, such as offline storage in secure core wallet, right? What do you think about this? Because I feel that while these specifications is kind of tough specification, but they are also very prudent and designed to mitigate operational risk from the market. Do you think these are too tough for current market players or newcomers in the industry? This is my second question.
Okay, thank you. Okay, I will. Yeah, so start sharing my screen again. Okay, so regarding the regarding your first question for foreign exchanges, yes, I think it's generally very hard for foreign businesses to obtain licenses in Japan, mostly because of the language barrier. So obviously the regulation is in Japanese. There are English translations, but I think there are many many guidelines and like non-statutory rules, and I think it's kind of difficult for foreign companies to fully comprehend. Well, it's not impossible, but it takes a lot of money to, I think, hire local staff and lawyers to really understand the rules. And one of the things I should mention is that the Japanese government is working very hard to attract foreign businesses, especially in the financial services sector, to Japan, to increase the competitiveness of Tokyo. So I think they are trying very hard to translate these rules and also make it easier for foreign companies to apply. But in the context of virtual currency exchanges, I don't know if any foreign exchanges have been obtained license from Japan. And my guess is that since this is a very new business model, I think it's kind of still, it still may be relatively difficult for foreign companies to obtain their license. And with regard to the second question, I don't know if I have the ability to fully answer your question, but one of the topics that were often discussed after the hack was that the use of hot wallets that are connected online, and the amendment that was in response to this incident is the amendment of the Payment Services Act in 2019, and it came into force in May this year. And I think I believe it requires exchanges to use these cold wallets that are offline to secure the keys. But I think there were a lot of discussion regarding whether that's like practically possible, and um, although I think the law in principle, I think it requires, but there may be kind of alternative measures. Um, but I think generally, since the law is made in response to the hacking incident, the security requirements is very high on the exchanges.
Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Okay, so thank you very much for Kotaro today's your valuable time to bring us very like the landscape of Japanese fintech development and also the regulatory condition and the situation. So thank you very much once again, and also really appreciate for both Sally and Paui for you to join us.
Okay, you're welcome. Thank you for having me.
Okay,
Thank
so
you.
I think today we basically gather more than 10,000 people. So I think without Kotaro, Paui, Sally, we cannot making today's event so engaging and successful. So I hope to meet all of you in person in Tokyo, in Hangzhou, or in Bangkok.
Yes.
Okay, so have a nice evening.
Okay, thank you.
Okay,
Thank you.
bye.